Hey, have you ever stopped to think about what's actually happening in your brain when you meet someone for the first time? Well, today, we're going to dive right into the incredible science of how our minds see the social world all around us. Let's get into it. You know that feeling, right? You meet someone, and within minutes, you just click. It's easy, and then other times, something just feels off, and you can't quite put your finger on why. Well, it turns out that gut feeling isn't just random. It's not magic. It's actually science, and we're going to break it all down. Believe it or not, scientists have been digging into these everyday social mysteries for a long, long time. And it all comes together under one really fascinating field of study. And that field, it's called social psychology. To put it simply, it's the science of how we're all influenced by the people around us. I mean, think about it. You probably act a little differently with your best friend than you do with your boss, right? Social psychology is all about figuring out why that happens. It's about the way we all affect each other. And this right here, this is a huge idea in social psychology. It's a pretty simple formula when you look at it. Your behavior is a mix of who you are as a person plus the environment you're in. See, who you are is only one part of the equation. Where you are matters just as much. You're going to be way more relaxed and jokey with friends than you are in, say, a formal job interview, right? Well, that's the environment changing your behavior right there. All right, so now that we've got that basic idea down, let's start where pretty much all of our social interactions begin, with that first impression. How in the world do we make these judgments so fast? Okay, so here's the wild part. This whole process happens in literally the blink of an eye. Your brain makes up its mind about someone faster than you can even say hello. And this isn't some new thing. It's an ancient survival skill. You know, our ancestors had to decide fast if a stranger was a friend or a foe. So what's our brain looking at in those few seconds? Well, it's scanning for three main things. First up, physical cues. You know, how a person looks, how they're dressed, how they carry themselves. Then it looks for distinguishing features. Anything that really stands out, like a bright pink haircut or a super loud laugh. And finally, social categories. Our brain quickly tries to file people into groups we already understand, like their job, their gender, or maybe their age. Now listen up, because this is so important. The very first piece of information you learn about someone is usually the most powerful. It's a big deal, and it's called the primacy effect. So if the first thing you hear is that your new coworker is unfriendly, you're probably going to see everything they do after that through that negative filter. It's why first impressions are so incredibly sticky. And here's another one of those amazing mental tricks. It's called the halo effect. Basically, if we see one thing we like about a person, let's say they have a really warm, friendly smile, our brain kind of puts a little halo over their head. We just start to assume they must also be smart and kind and trustworthy, all from that one good quality. And yeah, you guessed it, the opposite is totally true too. But here's the thing, we don't judge ourselves in the same way we judge other people. This is called the actor-observer effect. When we mess up, like maybe we fail an exam, we tend to blame the situation. We'll say, oh, the teacher was unfair or the test was way too hard. But when we see someone else fail that same exam, we're much quicker to blame their personality. We think, wow, they must be lazy. See the difference? We're the star actor in our own movie, but we're just an observer in everyone else's. So all of these things we've been talking about, the primacy effect, the halo effect, they're all examples of mental shortcuts. Our brains are using them constantly to make sense of the world. So let's zoom in a little closer and see how they actually work. I want you to think of your brain as a cognitive miser. That just means it's a little bit lazy. It doesn't want to spend all its energy carefully analyzing every single tiny detail of every social situation. Honestly, that would be completely exhausting. So to save time and energy, it takes shortcuts. And one of the biggest shortcuts our brain loves to use is something called a schema. Just imagine your brain has this giant filing cabinet inside. A schema is like one folder in that cabinet, a folder for a specific topic based on all your past experiences. So when you encounter something new, your brain just quickly finds the right folder to drop it into. For instance, you definitely have a schema for a birthday party. The second someone invites you to one, your brain pulls out that file, and bam! Instantly, you expect certain things. Cake, gifts, friends, maybe some music. You don't have to figure it all out from scratch every single time. It's already there. So these schemas are super helpful, right? I mean, they save us so much time and mental energy. But there's a downside. What happens if the information inside one of our mental folders is wrong or incomplete? Well, that's when schemas can get us into trouble, leading to misunderstandings, false expectations, and even prejudice. And that's exactly what a stereotype is. It's just a schema, a mental folder, but for an entire group of people. It's a really dangerous kind of shortcut because it makes the assumption that every single person in that group is exactly the same. And of course, that's never, ever true. It completely ignores what makes each person an individual. Now, schemas aren't the only shortcuts. Our brain also uses something called heuristics, which are basically mental rules of thumb. For example, there's the representativeness rule. That's when we judge someone based on how well they seem to fit our idea of a certain group. Like if you see someone wearing glasses, you might automatically think they're super smart. Then there's the availability rule. This is when we think something is way more common just because we can remember an example of it easily. Like, if you just saw a news story about a shark attack, you might suddenly feel terrified to go swimming, even though those attacks are actually incredibly rare. Okay, so we've learned our brains are basically shortcut machines, constantly making snap judgments and using these mental files to get through the day. So, what are we supposed to do with all this information? So, what's the big takeaway here? It's really simple, actually. It's all about awareness. Just by knowing that your brain does all this stuff automatically, you now have the power to step back and question it. The next time you get a strong gut feeling about someone, you can hit pause for just a second and ask yourself, wait, is this real? Or is this just one of my brain's shortcuts doing the thinking for me? All right, let's do a quick recap of what we've covered. First, our brains are wired to judge people instantly. Second, they do this by using super efficient shortcuts like schemas and heuristics. Third, while these shortcuts are useful, they can absolutely lead to bias and mistakes. And finally, the best tool we have to fight this is simple awareness, just knowing that it's happening in the first place. So, I'll leave you with this question. The next time you meet someone new, now that you know all about your brain's love for shortcuts, what are you going to do? Are you going to let those automatic judgments take the wheel? Or are you going to take just a moment longer to see the real individual person standing in front of you? The choice, as always, is yours. Thanks for exploring the social brain with me today.